Hi, I'm Lena Fowler, and on my research team is Camelia Ye. Our research mentor is Lin Shu. We investigated the Information and Communications Technology sector, or the ICT sector's sustainability initiatives through global supply chains. I also will discuss policy implications of these sustainability practices. To do so, we first obtained a 20% sample, or 164 companies, from Bloomberg's terminal dataset with public-facing sustainability disclosures, which form about 10% of all ICT companies. We collected their reports based on their social and environmental supply chain practices, then used in vivo software to practice qualitative coding, strictly adhering to a codebook categorizing their practices and characteristics. We iteratively refine the codebook to improve intercoder reliability and to ensure quality coding.
Thank you, Lena, for introducing. I'm Camelia, and I'll be speaking for the next portion of this presentation. The graph you see right now hopefully gives you a good sense of the diversity of companies within the ICT sector in both the categories, what they produce, what they do, and their size, or in this graph, their annual revenue. One thing to note is that Microsoft, Alphabet, and Apple were not part of our final sample size of 20%, but they're here because they're very public, well-known actors in the ICT sector that highlight the big difference in both breadth and thoroughness of their sustainability initiatives compared to the majority of the ICT sector clumped in this bottom left quadrant. You can see here in an exploded view. They really differ across the board in both category and in size, but one thing they have in common is that there's a lot of room for improvement in both their reporting techniques and their actual sustainability practices. This graph shows the percent of companies that implement a given SSP. SSP is a sustainable sourcing practice. An interesting thing here is how uncommon external standards are, such as multi-stakeholder standard or voluntary government standard. This means that the practices that they're implementing are defined by the company, they're implemented and regulated by the company. So between company to company, the practice can look very different in how it takes form, since there is no standardization. This graph shows the application of energy program by tier level. There's a big emphasis on the tiers that are closest to the focal company. So the data centers, they operate their own devices at the consumer use phase and how they're transporting the materials. One thing to note is that many ICT subcategories lack a physical traditional supply chain, like an assembly tier or a raw material producer by nature of what they do. So media companies or software companies, which might explain why you don't really see the first tier, sub-tier, and raw material producer on this graph. However, considering that manufacturing accounts for up to 80% of a device's carbon footprint, and that you don't really see those tiers at all in this graph, that goes to show how much companies have to do to address the carbon footprint of their upstream suppliers if they want to reduce their overall impact on the environment.
The trends we see in ICT private policy are a likely indicator of what's to come in green tech public policy. Circular economy, an economic system aimed at the continual use of resources and eliminating waste, will likely be a topic of interest in green technology regulation at the federal level in the future. We can already see ICT industry leaders such as Apple and Amazon utilizing device take-back programs and refurbishing products for continued use. As finite resources such as precious metals integral to ICT technology dwindle, the concept of circular economy will only increase in importance. Similarly, notably absent from a majority of companies is a mention of e-waste policy. We found that while 60% of companies adhered to a company-wide sustainability standard, only 20% of companies mentioned material end-of-life practices. The US is a world leader in producing the most e-waste, however, has only recently begun to discuss regulatory practices at a federal level. This has historically been addressed through international shipments and landfilling e-waste. Landfilling hazardous materials can leach out into groundwater or run off and pollute into nearby water bodies. From my experience assisting in federal litigation involving polluted waters, I know that these incidences of groundwater contamination will only rise in the future as the ICT industry grows. Only through regulatory encouragement of circular economy and safe recycling practices can we see improvement, not just in those few tech giants with the resources to allocate towards sustainability initiatives, but across the board throughout the industry as a whole. Thank you very much for taking the time to learn about our research. A special thank you to the following people for making our research possible. Lynn Scher, our research mentor and PhD candidate of the EIPER program, Adam Brandt, our faculty advisor for this project, and the whole CSOR program.